On the scarred battlefields of eastern Ukraine, the front lines are shifting once again. Russian forces push deeper into Donetsk, the largest advance in a year, as the world's eyes turn to a high-stakes summit in Alaska. In Sloviansk, fear grows that diplomacy might redraw borders without a single shot being fired. Yet the shelling never stops. Russian forces have made one of their most significant advances in eastern Ukraine in the past year, pushing up to 17 kilometers into Ukrainian-held territory near the coal mining town of Dobropillia, Wall Street Journal has reported. Quoting analysts, the journal said the move may be aimed at securing leverage ahead of the August 15th planned meeting between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska. Ukraine's military reported counterattacks against small Russian infantry groups that had pierced the first line of defences and bypassed months-old fortifications. Another penetration elsewhere on the front was repelled last week. The breach, if widened, could give Moscow an opening to pressure cities still controlled by Kyiv in the eastern Donetsk region, a declared Kremlin target. Ukraine's deep state WMAP showed Russian forces advancing at least 10 kilometers north in two prongs toward the towns of Kostiantynivka and Pokrovsk. These moves come as Ukrainian forces face a severe shortage of infantry, with some front lines described by soldiers as overstretched and undermanned. Pasi Parawinen, a military analyst with the Finland-based Blackbird Group, told Reuters that the forward Russian units had reached the Dobropillia-Kramatorsk T0514 road, with infiltration groups reported near Dobropillia proper. Ukrainian troops in the area have described weeks of probing attacks before Russian forces found a gap and pushed through using massed manpower. Military analysts remain divided over the breakthrough's significance. Konrad Muzica of Rochan Consulting described it as the result of more than a week of infiltration and positional gains rather than a sudden collapse. Still, some Russian commentators have likened it to a gift for Putin and Trump ahead of negotiations. The advances come amid reports that the Kremlin has proposed to US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff a ceasefire in exchange for Ukrainian withdrawal from the remainder of Donbas. Kyiv has rejected the idea outright, with President Volodymyr Zelensky insisting that any peace must be just. A research fellow at the Ukraine Forum at Chatham House told Reuters August 12th that Ukraine will reject any deal imposed without its participation in the Trump-Putin talks ahead of the Alaska summit.
This is one of the key objectives of the Kremlin ahead of the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska, is also putting forward proposals that are unacceptable for Ukraine in order to present Ukraine as an uncooperative and ungrateful actor to Trump's peace brokering efforts. And in turn, that could also create and drive a wedge between the US and the European allies that have consistently emphasized the importance of maintaining Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
On August 12th, President Volodymyr Zelensky thanked European leaders for backing Ukraine's independence and urged unity in pursuing a dignified peace.
I am grateful to the leaders of Europe for their clear support of our independence, territorial integrity, and precisely such an active approach to diplomacy that can help end this war with a dignified peace. Indeed, we all support President Trump's determination, and together we must shape positions that will not allow Russia to deceive the world once again. We see that the Russian army is not preparing to end the war. On the contrary, they are making movements that indicate preparations for new offensive operations. In such circumstances, it is important that the unity of the world is not threatened.
In the past, Moscow has launched offensives ahead of negotiations to strengthen its bargaining position. Some Ukrainian and Western analysts believe the current thrust could be aimed at replicating that pattern. former Kremlin advisor Sergei Markov told Russian media that the breakthrough was possible due to a partial collapse in the front and Ukraine's manpower shortage, suggesting it could pressure Kyiv into concessions to avoid losing all of Donetsk by force. On the ground, however, many Ukrainians doubt that a land for peace agreement will emerge from the Trump-Putin meeting. In Sloviansk, where shelling is frequent, residents say talk of ceding territory feels surreal. In Sloviansk, a frontline city in Ukraine's Donetsk region, talk of a proposed US-Russia ceasefire deal has deepened uncertainty and panic in a place long defined by war. Local journalist Mikhailo told CNN that the talk of a Ukraine land deal at Friday's Alaska summit seems dark and surreal.
I feel like I just float away from this reality. Many of my friends want to stay here and we all will have to leave. But frankly speaking, I don't think it's going to happen.
The reported proposal, raised by Kremlin officials with US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff ahead of the talks, would see Russia halt its offensive in exchange for control over parts of the Donbas it has yet to capture. Territory that includes Sloviansk. Kyiv has rejected the idea outright, but its discussion has unsettled a region battered by near-constant shelling. A local, Ludmila, said that the proposed meeting is all about politics.
For them, it is all a spectacle. They decide one thing, say another, and do another. That's always been politics.
The shift is stark. Since Ukrainian forces retook Sloviansk from Russian-backed separatists in 2014, they have repelled repeated assaults. New defensive trenches now mark the city's western approaches, a sign of fears that Russian troops could once again threaten its streets. For many residents, the suggestion that Washington might consider Moscow's demands feels like a profound betrayal. Timing is key. Russia's military movements indicate preparations for renewed offensives, a warning echoed by President Vladimir Zelensky in his latest address. Recent missile and drone strikes have ravaged civilian infrastructure in Sloviansk and nearby Kramatorsk, leaving warehouses, apartment blocks, and vital services in ruins. Air raid sirens punctuate daily life as emergency crews clear debris. Military planners share civilian concerns. Donetsk remains fiercely contested, with Ukrainian troops stretched thin by Russian pushes in both the east and south. Analysts warn that surrendering any part of Donbas would reward Russian aggression, weaken Ukraine's defensive depth, and embolden further territorial demands. For Moscow, the proposal could cement battlefield gains and recast the invasion as a diplomatic negotiation rather than a failed offensive. For Washington, critics say it risks alienating European allies, undermining Ukrainian morale, and offering no guarantee of lasting peace. As the Alaska summit between Presidents Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin approaches, Ukrainian officials remain skeptical. Zelensky insists on cooperation with Washington, but refuses any territorial concessions. European capitals watch anxiously, wary of a deal that sidelines them and reshapes the continent's security map. In Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, life grinds on under bombardment, with little faith that diplomacy will halt the war, and deep fear it could redraw borders without their consent.